Awesome.
But anyways, I already introduced myself, Nathan Ritchey. Work as a network engineer right now, helping out a lot of YMCAs across the country, mainly helping a lot of them secure their networks right now. There's lots of threats all over the internet, and nonprofits are no different than everybody else out there. And in fact, there's a lot of nonprofits that are targeted pretty heavily nowadays too. So I'm doing a lot of work to help these guys stay secure. It's fun because I get to jump into different network environments, from a small little single building to massive, like 10 building complexes and campuses across like a whole metro area. So lots of experience securing networks. That kind of leads me to this. My talk today is about OpenSense. OpenSense is an open source firewall application. It's a great tool, especially for learning network security. It's based off pfSense. Has anybody here heard of pfSense or OpenSense? Okay, awesome. Based on a BSD license, it's got a really awesome GUI. So if you're not great with command line interfaces or old Cisco gear, OpenSense is great for that. One thing that's really cool about it is all the modular plugins you can get for OpenSense. So you can take it and start a really basic router, and you can scale it up to something incredibly powerful that rivals even some of the commercial offerings out there. So super, super awesome. And one cool part about it is it's all software based. So you can take anything from like this thin client that I have here. I paid $30 for this on eBay. Put a $20 network card in it and like a $10 SSD. And I have a fully capable firewall of IDS and IPS and all the cool stuff. So that's really awesome for that. Being that this is an open source project, it has frequent community updates, and the organization behind it provides pretty frequent updates to it as well. So, and that company is Decisio BV. Yeah. All right. So yeah, I kind of went over the hardware cost. You can get into this for a few bucks, or you could scale a full server as expensive as you want it. It's highly customizable, highly secure, highly stable. Those little routers that you get off the shelf at Best Buy or that your ISP gives you, they're awful. There's a lot of backdoor. I know, right?
No way.
Your ISP does some fishy stuff too on those routers too that not a lot of people know about. So this is a good way to secure your network, gain a little bit of privacy from your ISP as well. It's incredibly powerful. There's a lot of really awesome enterprise firewalls out there, but you're looking at, a few $1,000s to get into options like that. What makes this really cool is you're going to get the same sort of enterprise features for practically nothing. So if you really want to learn networking, OpenSense is an amazing tool to kind of dive in and learn very similar tools to what they use in the enterprise world every day. Yeah, here's a nice screenshot of the GUI here. You've got your service list over here, so you know what's running. You can see if any services have failures. There's just some general stats, traffic graphs. So yeah, the firewall that's built in is very restrictive by default. So it doesn't allow, it's block all traffic incoming unless you already have a, what is it, like a, sorry?
Explicit allow?
Huh?
Explicit allow?
Yeah.
Allow all.
Not allow all. A previously tagged packet. Basically, your computer sends a request out. It tracks that request and allows the traffic back in. It's got really awesome NAT built into it as well. A lot more powerful than you get on any consumer routers. It supports aliasing for all of your network addresses, which is pretty nice. So if you're you could set up an alias for all the addresses in your network. Any resources outside of the network you need, and you can tag your firewall rules by the aliases, making it a lot easier. And then especially if you have to go in and change the address for something, you go in and change the alias versus changing the rule itself. So that simplifies a lot with your rules. It supports GeoIP blocking.
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm not fully understanding the alias purpose. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so instead of saying 192.168.1.3 or 212, whatever,
Sure.
which is probably something you might forget if you're not typing that in every day. But instead you could say, that's my desktop.
Oh, like a friendly name per se.
Yep.
I get it. Never
Yeah,
mind.
so-
Okay, easy. Yep.
Yeah, and you can also use that for like services inside your network. You can use it for addresses outside of the network. And like I said, it makes changing stuff really simple. Geo-blocking, it supports two-factor authentication out of the box, which is pretty cool, TOTP. You could also do LDAP or Radius. It supports lots and lots of different authentication mechanisms, so that's pretty cool. Has a traffic shaper built in, so that's another neat networking feature, or security feature. It supports VLANs, so that's something fun you can do with this that you will have, you will need to know if you ever do corporate or enterprise networking. VLANs are all over the place, really good to learn them. This will let you do it out of the box. Your Linksys or Comcast router, definitely not. It supports DynDNS or dynamic DNS. Actually, it supports several different ones, which is cool if you're on, like, say, a Comcast connection and you want to connect into your box for any reason. That IP is likely to change over time, so you can use dynamic DNS, or excuse me, dynamic DHCP, dynamic DNS to give you a hosting to connect to your box to, instead of IP address that could randomly change on you at any given moment. So that's cool. Let's see. Yeah, DHCP server, static mapping, that's pretty bog standard stuff for a lot of networking gear. It does give you a lot of control over that, so that's kind of nice compared to the basic routers you can get. Supports unbound DNS, which is kind of cool. It's a caching DNS resolver, so you can actually run your own DNS cache on the box. Let's see. Yeah, DNS over TLS and DNS over HTTPS, so that's a nice big upgrade over the standard DNS. If you want that extra layer of security and anonymity, supports a whole bunch of other stuff, OpenVPN, basically any type of VPN you want to do, OpenSense will do. Like I said, a lot of these are enterprise-grade features that you'll be using day-to-day throughout any sort of networking career.
What's GRE again? I forgot. I can't remember. Anybody? GRE?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. Sorry.
It's because nobody uses it.
I guess. What is that?
This is where OpenSense gets really cool. The plugins. So one that's really cool is Zenarmor. It's a next-gen firewall plugin. It's sort of like these smart firewalls you're seeing now that give you like a dashboard that lets you kind of go through the traffic that's happening on your network. You can filter things out, see who's connecting to what sites and where. It's got TLS inspection. Pretty good for helping you figure out where an issue might be, as far as a whole bunch of stuff. Supports WireGuard, so it's a more modern VPN client, or protocol rather. You can use it for site to site. If you want to have two of these connect two buildings together, you can do that. Or you can use WireGuard to, say, connect in from the outside world on your cell phone, your laptop. If you're out and about and you need to access your network, you can do that with WireGuard. It's got a whole bunch of different proxies, so you can run proxies on there. Let's see, Unbound DNS, I briefly talked about that before, I believe. Unbound DNS and AdGuard kind of do the same thing. But basically, what it lets you do is run your own ad blocker. sort of in the router itself. So every device in your house will have ad blocking effectively on it. Here's one that I use all the time, and this one's really awesome. It's zero tier, which is another type of VPN, but it's a software-defined VPN. You set up a network on the zero tier website. You can connect this to your zero tier network. You can connect your phone to the network, a whole bunch of other devices. It's really great for connecting a bunch of stuff together that's separated on the internet. So really cool for that. So here's kind of like the big thing that makes this really awesome, especially if you want to run your own home lab or learn about a lot of the tools that you're going to see in corporate networking gear, is the intrusion detection and intrusion protection system. IDS and IPS, they're similar but slightly different. So intrusion detection system is going to alert you if it finds something suspicious connecting into your network or pinging your network. It can do a whole bunch of stuff. Intrusion protection is actually going to block that traffic from getting in on your network. So the engine that OpenSense uses is called Suricata. It's an open source engine that I believe the team, I believe they actually wrote that one themselves. I'd have to look that up, but it uses TLS handshake metadata, DNS data, IP port protocol patterns, flow anomalies, unencrypted traffic. So it kind of looks at all those things, and you have your rule sets. It's going to look at those rule sets and match the rules to any type of that traffic that's coming in, and it's either going to alert you or it's going to block that traffic. Now, a lot of networks, or in a lot of environments, SSL inspection, which is like basically running your own man-in-the-middle attack on your own network, so you can actually decrypt and look into that traffic. But in this case, it's probably not something you're going to be doing because it's very difficult to set up. You're going to have your own certificate that you hand out and install on all of your devices for that to work. Now, if you're in the corporate environment, you can very easily hand out SSL certificates over your network through your domain. So that's, you'll see some of that in enterprise networks too, for sure. Because it's a lot easier to implement. But you can still do a ton with just the methods that Suricata uses to inspect traffic. So a box like this that I have right here, like I said, is really inexpensive. And this will run IDS and IPS for a few bucks. Really cool. Now the thing about it is, you look at the rule sets, you download, go into OpenSense, you download the rule sets, you're like, oh, there's a lot of stuff here. I can protect against somebody hacking my Nintendo Switch. There's a rule set for that, or whatever you want. Like, there's tons of rule sets. Now, in order to run this right, you need to tune your rule sets, and this is kind of going to be a big thing for any IDS or IPS. Because you run too many rule sets in a box like this, which could handle a gigabit connection, suddenly you're down to like 100 megabits in and out, because it's doing all that processing, doing all that inspection. So having a well-tuned rule set is really, really critical when using IDS or IPS. So using too many rules is going to degrade your network performance. Another thing is, and I've noticed this a lot running my own IDS before, is you're going to get a ton of false positives. So you enable too many rule sets, there's going to be false positives left and right. And then that kind of adds to the noise when you're going through and looking at your logs. You're like, what does this log alert or this log entry actually mean? What's somebody actually trying to do? Are they trying to see what devices are on my network? Are they trying to breach a service that I have public on my network? You don't know if you have way too many logs to dig through. So that's kind of really important right there. Like I said, don't enable way too many rule sets at once. That's a really bad idea. This thing will crawl to a halt. Now, when you're doing your own network, you probably know what's running on there. Say you might have an NVR for your cameras that you want to access from the internet. You might have a web server in some cases that you want to access through the internet. So it's important to look for those services that you are running and do install the rule sets for those services. That way you can actually be ensured that those services are being monitored and protected based on IDS and IPS. We are talking about the false positives. That's just more of an annoyance thing when you have to start digging through all these logs. And it can start to drive you a little crazy. Like that'll happen pretty fast. And when you're dealing with security log alerts, it's too easy to get overly paranoid about your alerts that are coming in, instead of sitting there and actually trying to figure out what the alerts are. And some of them can look really scary until you start researching them. You're like, oh, that makes sense. That's why I'm getting this alert. Now, when you're running one of these, there's a baseline rule set that I would recommend running on this. The ET Open Emerging rule sets are publicly available rule sets. They're already, the links to them are already built into OpenSense. So you simply have to check a few checkboxes and it installs these rule sets. But we have the ET Emerging Trojan rule set. Detects any Trojans in command and control communication. That's probably one of the most important ones you can run. Not only are you going to be able to tell if somebody's trying to access machines on your network if they're infected, it also detects if you have devices, say that smart toaster you bought from a Kickstarter 3 years ago that you haven't touched the smart features on since you got it. That could be running command and control. It could have malware on it. You don't know. You normally wouldn't know. But the cool part about IDS is you'll be able to actually figure out what devices, as long as you're running the right rule sets, you'll know if those devices are trying to phone home. Yeah, really cool for that. The malware, basically the same thing. Detects no malware signatures, so if you have a device that's infected with malware, you'll know. You'll get an alert for that. Mobile malware, same thing but for mobile devices. Current events is for major threats in 0 days. User agents, suspicious user agent strings. So one thing for that is I use Screen Connect and what's the other one? One of the other remote viewer tools a lot for my work at home job. And I was getting tons and tons of user agent alerts coming in. And it was for Screen Connect. And so it was actually detecting that I had that service running. And since I had that alert in there, it was actually alerting me in my IDS that I had tools running that are commonly used for remote controlled devices. So, and those are widely used by scammers and phishers all across the internet. So it really kind of cool to see that detection happen live.
Why would it do user agent strings? Why would it alert on that Screen Connect? I don't know.
It's just that category. It's what's the right way to word this? That category is where it's, or the rule set for user agent strings, like Screen Connect, a whole bunch of different random tools are under there. So it's not necessarily tools that are malicious in nature by default, but are often used by criminals. It's got a ton of them. I'd have to dig into the list itself, but yeah. There's one for DNS tunneling, fast flux detection, web clients. So if you have a compromised web browser, you can get alerts for that. Policy unwanted protocols. You don't want anybody on your home network running Tor or BitTorrent, you can get alerts for that, or you could block that traffic. And the last one's for port scans and probing. So that's a pretty generic one, but it'll cover a lot of alerts for that. So that's kind of like where the security aspect of OpenSense is really neat. And there's a lot of good videos on the internet about tuning your IDS and IPS on OpenSense. But if you're learning cybersecurity, network security, running your own IDS and IPS is an incredibly useful learning tool. Because normally you're not going to have access to that sort of technology at home, but when you're able to, you can learn a ton about it. So, I know this is kind of more on the fun stuff here. The hardware for OpenSense, it runs on x86 64 CPUs. It's not really hardware dependent, other than the type of processor you have. You can run it on this box, you can run it on a used computer, you can run it on an old computer. You could have a $10,000 server if you want. You could run it in a virtual machine. That's another good way to experiment with this if you want. Yeah, so get rid of that old router and figure out something new. So one good way to go is by checking eBay. You can find these old Dell Optiplexes or Lenovo desktops, super cheap. Talking like 50, 60 bucks. One thing you want is a PCI Express interface that's needed so you can actually add a network card. So that you can actually get your network traffic in and out of the box. 8 gigabytes of RAM is perfectly fine. 16 gigs is preferable if you want to do IPS. But you can run IDS just fine with 8 gigs. A dual core CPU is plenty. As long as you're getting something within the last decade, you should be good. Intel 6th or 7th gen is perfectly fine. And whatever cheap SSDs you can find. I just recommend running SSDs so that the database lookups for the IPS is a little quicker. That and you're running this thing 24/7 and mechanical drives just kind of fail over time. And here's a really important point if you want to build one of these yourself. There are many chipsets that you can get for the network cards out there. A really common chipset is the Realtek and Broadcom chips for the network cards. Don't get those. They are awful with BSD. But the Intel network cards work perfectly fine.
Well, they're like awful with everything, aren't they? They're
Yeah,
terrible
much,
with
yeah.
Linux.
Their audio's awful.
Yeah.
The networking's awful.
They always have bugs. They never work.
Yeah. Especially when you're dealing with open source drivers for it too.
I've had them brick before. I've had the network card brick before.
Wow.
Yeah.
That kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Now here's one thing when you're running a box like this. You notice we don't have a Wi-Fi antenna on here. We only got 2 Ethernet ports. Technically there's a third, but that's a Broadcom Realtek right there. So we don't use that one. We don't talk about it. But so one thing you do need to get to is a network switch and a wireless access point. But we'll cover that here in a bit. So I went on eBay. I found this. $60. It's got an i5 6th gen, 8 gigabytes of RAM. It doesn't have a hard drive, but that's okay because we can get an SSD for like $20 on Amazon. Plenty of power for this thing. A quad core with 3.2 gigahertz. It's still fairly efficient, but if you're concerned about your power use, I wouldn't recommend it. It's going to pull, what do I have here, 25 to 35 watts idle, 45 to 65 watts under load. There's some videos out there that go over pretty good builds for energy efficient OpenSense builds, but so this is pretty important right here. This is how we're going to get, without a network card, we have a CPU, RAM, and a hard drive that's kind of sitting there doing nothing. And we need a LAN connection for your internet. We need a LAN connection for your local network. Right here you get these Intel network cards, $20 on eBay. So not a really big investment right there. Yeah, and you can actually, another cool part about this is you can really scale these as you want. So right here, this is like the first one that I built. The new one I've got, since I have a 2 gigabit ISP, I have dual Q or SFP plus ports on my new box, and that allows me to do 10 gigabit networking in and out. It probably can't process more than 4 or 5 gigabits at a time, but you can actually have a 10 gigabit connection on there if you want.
Out of curiosity, where do these cards come from?
All these are all data center cards.
Data center cards, but they're not server. I mean,
Well, yeah, they come out of servers mainly.
like one use or I mean.
This one right here is a 1U card because it's got the. That's another thing to look for when if you want to build a device like. See this. This is not a standard height PCI. This is a small form factor. So it's important when you're building one of these and getting the cards for it that you look for one with a low profile bracket if you've got a smaller computer that requires that, or if you have a bigger computer with a standard PCI slot, you can get a normal bracket. But yeah, a lot of these are used server cards. eBay is flooded with them, absolutely flooded with them. That's why you can get them for $20. Yeah, I think I paid like 40 something for my dual 10 gigabit card. And that's still a small form factor card, so you can fit into something like this. And once again, don't get the Realtek or the Broadcom cards. Definitely not good for this. It's a little better with OpenSense. Now, pfSense has slower release cycles. OpenSense is a fork of pfSense. OpenSense is known in the community for having better modern hardware support because they're on a much more frequent release cycle. pfSense is a fairly slow release cycle, and they're kind of phasing out free open source product in favor of their paid product now. So OpenSense is still keeping everything open source and free, so that's awesome. That's just something to consider. Yeah, you can get whatever storage you want. 128 gigs is overkill for this. One thing it does support is ZFS, which is a file system. It supports that out of the box, and you can do mirroring out of the box. So if you want to have something that's even more reliable, just buy 2 of these SSDs, 17, 18 bucks. You can even find the 64 gig ones if you dig around on eBay and don't mind used ones. You can get those for like under $10 a piece. So 2 of those, you can have redundant storage for the OS. So that's a good way to go if you want something super reliable, or just get one of these cheap SSDs on Amazon and go with that. So like I was saying earlier, like we don't have Wi-Fi on this, and we don't have an Ethernet switch on this. So you can kind of dig around wherever you want to. If you got more than one LAN device to connect to this, you're probably fine. Or if you don't have more than one, but I don't know of anybody that just has a single Ethernet device in their house. So you can find cheap switches all day long. In fact, you could probably ask a number of people in here if they have an old switch laying around, and I'd bet more than a few people would answer that. But you can buy brand new MikroTik switches, which are pretty cool, $100. Those let you do a bunch of cool stuff too. Unify switches are really cool if you want that modern, like cloud-based Apple approach to things. Same with the access points. For $30, you can get a MikroTik HAP, which is a little home router, but you can just disable the routing part of that, use the switch on it, and use the Wi-Fi on it. Or what you can do is put your old router into, or just disable the HCP on it. You can disable other routing features on it and just kind of use your old router as a switch and a Wi-Fi access point. Extra points if you want to install DDWork or OpenWork on your old switch or old router to give you a little bit more control over that. So one of these boxes tops like $100. Repurpose your old switch or your old router for free, and you get a pretty awesome setup. Yeah. So yeah, whole setup, $140 if you wanted to get a used switch and a MikroTik for your wireless, super cheap. And you know, they sell ridiculous routers out there right now. A lot of these off-the-shelf routers have lots of vulnerabilities, and they cost a fortune, and they don't do like half of what this thing can do. So, and it's really, who's installed Linux in here? So, like, yeah, quite a few. Everybody's familiar with that. So this is the same thing. Download the ISO, put it on a USB drive, and install it. When you're in the boot process for the first time, it's going to ask you what the WAN adapter is. You tell it which of the ports on the back of your box is your WAN connection and which one is the LAN. You can assign an automatic address at that point or DHCP address at that point, or you can assign a static WAN address. It'll guide you through the process as you're going. Reboot, sign into the interface, reset your root password, install your updates, and you're good to go. And yeah, here's some, if anybody's interested, here's some other stuff. Linus Tech Tips actually did a video on how to set these up. That's a pretty good watch. This one in the middle is what I based my new router off of. It's a tiny little Lenovo that's even smaller than this guy right here. But it's definitely capable of 10 gig networking and 2 to 3 gigabits of IPS. So it can do full traffic inspection for, I think I have $250 into it. It's good for 2 gigabits. And then we got the documentation. Does anybody have questions? No?
I wanted to talk about your vulnerability point. So
Yeah.
I went on Best Buy and I found the Netgear Wi-Fi 6 RAX 5 AX 1600. It's $150 and it's the only one in stock at Walmart.
Yeah.
If you search that on NVD, which is the National Vulnerability Database maintained by NIST, it has 40 vulnerabilities within the last 3 months. All of the severity 8 or higher.
Oh, geez.
And it's built into the microcontroller, the system on the chip. Like a lot of those are running.
Yeah, it's going to be like that for every router.
There's like 3 or 4 ARM chips that basically all consumer routers and all off-the-shelf routers use.
And those range from like remote code execution to like authentication bypass. I mean, it's
Now
So-
wait, so this
not
is like built-in default OS or version. You telling me that once you update the firmware, they're still vulnerable?
it could be.
Update before someone pops it?
Well,
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
question.
well,
It very well could be if it's a hardware level thing. I mean, we've seen it with AMD's processors a few years ago.
Well, Intel's had big vulnerabilities a long time ago too. Those are definitely you probably do want to upgrade the firmware on whatever device you decide to build your OpenSense blocks out of first. That would be a very good recommendation. Go to the manufacturer's site and download the latest firmware update, because who knows what sort of vulnerabilities are living in the CPU. But what's funny is that I ran some rule sets that were detecting for vulnerabilities like that, or scans rather. And once or twice a day, I get a whole bunch of scans from random IP addresses online, scanning my network for those vulnerabilities, for the basic routers. So those are scanning out there all the time. So if you got a vulnerable router, it's they're trying to hit it. And that's stuff you really learn when you do run your own IDS IPS. So that's kind of fun.
I had a question in the TLS inspection, versus the SSL. So I'm not sure how that actually works. Maybe I can bring this up at this discussion. So how does it intercept TLS, or does it look at the protocol before it encrypts? I don't know how this works.
So that's
Maybe that's
I've
a
never ran it
fine
myself,
question,
and I really don't have a good response to that because I've never messed with it myself.
Mm-hmm.
It would be fun to try.
Was this TLS inspection or?
Yeah. But from what I'm aware, your devices need your own. If you're going to do that on your router, you run it in a transparent proxy.
Okay.
You have a certificate on your router.
Yeah.
Your devices need a matching certificate. So basically, what's
So
happening
wait,
there-
so that's just like SSL. You need a certificate for the TLS inspection.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
That makes
basically, your
sense.
router is talking to the outside services, being like, "Oh yeah, I'm that device.
Mhm.
I'm this guy's cell phone, right?" And then your cell phone's got a certificate from the router, so it doesn't break encryption.
Gotcha. Okay.
It still does break some websites.
Mhm.
Guaranteed it's going to break everything Apple has out there or Google has out there. So I wouldn't recommend running, but technically with OpenSense you can do it. You just got to make sure all your devices get certificates. So everybody brings his phone over and connects to your Wi-Fi. He's out of luck.
I will tell you this, I'm an MSP. Years ago, I tried to do SSL with my customers, and that was the biggest mistake I've ever made. Because it's cool, right? But,